Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, How West Sussex Achieved Open and Honest Council Reporting. With us today are Ben Unsworth, Socrata Data Solutions Engineer, and Samantha Mowbray, Head of Policy and Communications for West Sussex County Council. They'll be sharing their insights into performance measurement and dashboarding, accountability, and communications with residents. And now, Ben, I'll hand the presentation over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. So as this has just been introduced, we'll be talking to Sam Mowbray from West Sussex County Council. And I'll be asking her a number of questions and to share some thoughts and ideas about how West Sussex have implemented their new approach to open and honest performance management reporting. By way of introduction, this is who's taking part in today's webinar. So you've already heard a little bit about me. I actually have a background in local government. So before joining Socrata, I was a performance and research manager at a number of different local authorities, mostly in the southeast of England. And now I'm working with local government across Europe to help improve how they use data in performance management and how they publish data out to the public. Sam, can I ask you to very quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Sam Mowbray. I've been Head of Policy and Communications here at the County Council for the past 18 months. I joined here last March. Before that, I've worked in the voluntary sector, mostly doing policy and public affairs, and was previously at Westminster Council a few years back, but I've worked in the sort of public and voluntary sector for most of my life, really.
The slide on your screens at the moment is just an overview of the things I'm going to discuss with Sam now. So we're going to be talking about three of the kind of core elements to a successful program. So forward-thinking leadership, good, clear outcomes and collecting the right data, and probably most importantly, how you develop a culture in an organisation that's responsive to using data to drive improvement. So the first of those is forward-thinking leadership. So when I started working with West Sussex, when Socrata started working with them on the performance dashboard, it was clear that West Sussex had a very well-defined vision for the county and a very strong commitment from the leader to better communicate how well they were doing across the services that the council provides to residents. So it's clear that a lot of work had gone into this before they even started to work with us to build the dashboard. So Sam, I'd really appreciate if you can just talk us through a little bit about how you got the organisation up to a point where it had this kind of clear vision for what it wanted to achieve in place.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said in my introduction, I started here last March, and when I started, that vision, which is illustrated on the slide you've put up, Ben, was already quite developed, and they were already thinking that they wanted clear priorities with clear outcomes attached to those, and I think that the cabinet pretty much knew what they wanted those priorities to be, and then it was very much, for me, it was very much about helping them to turn those into clear and definable outcomes that residents could understand. And you're right, Ben, when I started, one of the things that I talked about in my interview for the job was that it's brilliant that they had a performance framework that it took me ages to find in my research for the job, and I was very much saying to them, your contract with residents, you should be talking to residents about what you're going to achieve with their council tax, and I found that very difficult to find, to which the leader was nodding very vigorously during the course of my interview. And when I got the job, she very much held me to that and wanted me to explain how I was going to make that happen and how we were going to be more open and transparent with how we were delivering the things that residents thought were important. But they were already on the way. They had the building blocks in place, and that was very much driven by the leadership. And And it was, for us, my job was just helping them, as I say, to turn those into definable outcomes, and then from that work out how we could measure those outcomes and work out whether they were indeed measurable. We still have some way to go on that, but that was where we started from. But we did start from a very, very strong base with very, very strong direction from the top.
That's fantastic. So can I ask how, so when you have really clear leadership from the top, you're obviously very important in terms of steering an organisation. How have you found the, I guess the rest of the organisations kind of responded to that? How do you ensure that that commitment is something that's realised kind of throughout the whole organisation, you know, all the way down to what people are doing kind of day to day in their own roles within West Sussex?
Yeah, and it's difficult. It's like, I think that the thing that I describe as, it's like steering an oil tanker. So the leader and the cabinet have said this is what we want to achieve. Actually getting the organisation to fall behind that has taken much more time than probably you would expect, because obviously people are very, very entrenched in what they do, and actually trying to get them to change what they do in order to focus on the outcomes that the cabinet have set has been really quite difficult. And I think for me that was one of the real key drivers for coming into partnership with Socrata was, let's put our ambitions out there and let's talk about how we're trying to achieve those and how well we're doing, and that will force the organisation to align behind, not force, that's probably a bit too strong, but support the organisation and make it far more visible about where we're trying to get to. But it hasn't been easy. It's been quite difficult. Even yesterday, I was having conversations with some colleagues, which were, you know, just having these outcomes isn't going to mean that we're going to change what we do, and it does mean that we're going to change what we do. But what it's also helped with from an officer perspective is that because the cabinet have set out that clear vision, and we are focusing on those 12 particular outcomes, it's been really useful in focusing conversations with cabinet about, well, I'm going to sound really impolite, but pet projects. So when they said, oh, well, we really think we should do this, we've been talking about this, getting them to then think and reflect about whether they actually are supporting the outcomes that they've set has been really, really helpful from an officer perspective, and will continue to be so, I would imagine.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like you're already starting to see some impact of the approach you've taken and the changes you've made. And one of the kind of big questions in my mind, having worked in a number of performance management kind of offices since around 2000. So yeah, I've kind of been through the best values, the comprehensive performance assessments, and so on. And I think organisations got very good at learning how to kind of play the performance management game almost, to run the process, to kind of go through the motions. So probably a big question very early into the webinar, but do you think the new approach you've described means the council's actually having more honest conversations?
I do. It's very early days because we launched in late July, and it took us. And one of the things I would like to talk about a bit later is how quickly we managed to put this in place, and that was because we had the leadership and the buy-in from the leadership very early on. But what I have found is previously I'm responsible for strategic performance, but we had an internal process which was really cumbersome and difficult to use, and so people didn't want to fill in every month how they were doing, and they didn't want to use that particular system. So what people did, and I'm sure this is probably familiar to many people who are listening, is that you would set yourself targets or suggest targets that were really easy to achieve. So all you had to do was say, yeah, we're on target, we're achieving it. And green was always good. Green was always good. And when I started here, it became very evident that to some members of the cabinet, as long as everything was green, we were doing really, really well. And there's been two things I think that this system has helped with, and just the process of getting the system up and running is educating cabinet that sometimes having a green measure for 12 months of the year means that you've set the wrong target or you're measuring the wrong thing, and that, you know, things being amber is actually probably not a bad thing, and sometimes red isn't a bad thing either. But it's also this system, because it's so lovely to use, I think, has encouraged officers and it allows them to give that explanation and the mitigation for why maybe they're not hitting the target to the extent that they'd hoped to at this point in the year, because there is that room there to explain it, and it isn't just not hitting your target or hitting your target. I think there is that more honest conversation now about how we're doing, and I think that's been education on both sides, both officer and member.
That's fantastic. So a nice kind of lead through. So you've mentioned in there the importance of having, I guess, the right outcomes as part of your framework. So I'm going to kind of hop us forward onto the next slide and dig in a little bit more on the process around actually setting the things that you're going to measure. How do you set the right goals for your organisation in the context of that kind of strategic work that had been done to set the vision for West Sussex. So, Sam, your corporate strategy is quite clear in saying that West Sussex wants to really kind of focus its energy and resources on the things that make the biggest difference to residents. So actually, understanding what's important to them. So, how have you approached engaging people, actually having a dialogue with residents and making sure that you know that the things that you're doing really do reflect what's most important?
Yeah, we previously used to do a budget consultation, which was asking people what they wanted us to spend their money on. And usually we asked them after we'd set the budget, and it was a case of, are we spending our money on the right things? And what we have, before I couldn't honestly tell you how they got to the outcomes that we set previously, because that was before, a lot of those were set before my time. But what we did do is we tweaked those after going out. We did road shows with residents. We did we went through our county local committees, which are the equivalent of, I suppose, neighbourhood committees that a lot of councils have. We have something called county local committees, and we went out to loads of those, asking people whether the outcomes that we were setting were correct. And we're about to do that again, but the difference this time is that we're asking people that their priorities before we've even thought about what money we're spending. And what this system has helped us to do, and our approach now, is that we're setting performance measures and outcomes long before we even think about the money. Here we were very, very budget led. We had to set the budget, and then we worked out what we were spending the money on, which, when you think about it, is absolutely crazy. But what we're doing now is we're out at the moment on a consultation with residents for 7 weeks, asking them what services they care about, what matters to them in their communities and to their families. And from that, we will look at our outcomes. I don't think the outcomes will change very much at all, but it might be that we will tweak some of them depending on what residents are telling us. And I think that will be a continuous process. I think the Cabinet are very much of the view that this isn't something that will remain entirely static. There's been some really big things happening in West Sussex in the last year, and I think a lot of those may affect our thinking and the thinking of our residents. So we're going out again at the moment, asking them whether those outcomes are right and whether there are other things that we should be thinking about, and linking it again to money. So do they want to pay more or less money? But the money is no longer the driver. I think that what the outcomes that we want to achieve and how we're going to measure them is far more of a driver now than the cash.
Fantastic. So I guess a similar question, really. But looking a bit more inside the organisation. So again, I know from my experience that the kind of administrative impact of some of the previous performance management, certainly the nationally mandated performance management processes, were most often felt by the frontline services. Service managers who have a difficult enough job already delivering high quality services, and then also have to respond to demands from the corporate centre for reporting additional information. So I guess 2 questions really. How have you kind of worked with the services in developing this, and how do you feel that this has reduced the burden and the impact on them?
Yeah. We have a large number of goals in our dashboard at the minute. There's 53, I think, at last count. And we worked with services to develop those. So, it came from the top. It came from the cabinet that these are the things that, in terms of the outcomes. And then we worked through service plans and commissioning plans with services to make sure that they were aligned and taking out the best possible measures from those in order to see how we were doing against the outcomes. But in terms of the implementation of the performance dashboard, we put that performance dashboard together in 3 months. And the reason that we were able to do that is that we went to every single data owner, explained what we were trying to achieve, and for a lot of people, there's some quite brave data on our performance dashboard, especially in terms of some of the children's measures, and people were a little bit wary. But I think when they saw how easy it was to use compared to our old internal system, because we never published any of this publicly previously, and I think when they saw how easy it is to use and to get your data up there in a way that makes some sense to both us as is useful internally, as well as being open and honest and available externally, but also the fact that it gives you an opportunity to explain what it is that you're trying to achieve in tracking the measure and in having that doing that particular activity, and allows you to explain why you may not quite be hitting it. So if I can give you an example, and I'm probably going to be proved wrong because the data will have been updated since last time I looked at it, but one of the things we have is NHS health checks. Against an outcome of wanting people to maintain a healthy life expectancy, we measure in it the number of people taking up the NHS health checks for people aged 40 to 74. And last year, that measure was red for the vast majority of the year, and week after week and month after month, the people who were responsible for that measure were dragged to scrutiny committees and to cabinet to explain why it was red. Now, I think it might currently be red, actually, but now the system gives them the opportunity to explain to both members and to the outside world why it's red, what they're doing about it, but also allows them to market the service and why you should have that health check. So we then, the other side of my job is communications, so we're then using social media to go out highlighting that's been updated and getting people to have a look at it and linking to it so that we can target the sorts of people who are trying to have those health checks to turn that measure to green. So, and I think that's why the services like it. And there's a lot of services. We've got fostering and adoption numbers on there, and they're using it to market their service. They're branding it with their own livery. Broadband is similarly explaining what they're doing and how they're trying to get to various different places. So services are using it as much as a marketing tool as a way to explain what they're doing and why what they're doing is really important.
It's much more of a dialogue about performance management rather than just a kind of cold reporting mechanism. Absolutely,
absolutely. And I think I took this to our scrutiny committees last week. It's the first time they've really looked at it as a committee, and that's exactly what happened. It was far more of a dialogue about, well, why have we got that measure if there's only that many people using that service and you're only reporting so many calls a month? Why do we do it at all? How much money are you spending on it? And it was a far more forensic but amiable and two-way conversation than we might previously have had.
That sounds like great fun. So the flexibility and adaptability was kind of one of the things that looking across lots of successful performance management programs has kind of come up time and time again. I know when you get into a cycle of performance reporting, so kind of what you've just described about the previous approach with consistently going back to a committee with a red indicator and having the same conversations, it sounds like you're starting to be able to be a bit more flexible in that approach. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we are being able to be more flexible. There are always going to be, just talking about members now, my intention was this, the reason that we came to you for this system was entirely because we wanted to be more open and transparent to the public. The fact that we're now using it internally is an added bonus that we weren't really expecting, I suppose. But I think externally we've had a really good response to it and people understand it. I think internally we've got a little bit more work to do with some of our members to help them to understand how they can use it. And there will be people who still, like a piece of paper in their hands. But this system has meant that we have been able to move from a 92-page report that we used to produce for members every month to a 22-page report of pictures and diagrams, and that was finance as well as performance. But it has meant that we are, it's more transparent and open to both members and to members of the public. it means it's less onerous for staff to use as well. And I think it does allow us to be more flexible and to look at stuff in a more timely fashion. Previously, by the time it had been through Cabinet to agree what was going to go in the papers for scrutiny, by the time it was going to go out publicly, your data was generally about 2.5 months out of date. Whereas now, we say to them, this is what it's looking like now. By the time you get to your actual scrutiny meeting or to your Cabinet meeting, that might have changed. And the acceptance of that has actually been far better than I expected. But we've got a bit of a halfway house.
So you actually able to show them more real-time data during their meetings? Do they look at the dashboard itself?
Yeah, the dashboard goes up. Yeah, we put it up on a large screen at every meeting that we do talk about. It forms part of what we, without getting too technical, our total performance monitor. So the performance element of it. When previously we would look at 70 pages of notes and charts, now we put the dashboard up and we talk through the dashboard and we talk through, what elements of it people aren't particularly happy with. We send them in advance 3 screen grabs of the front page to remind them that it's there and that they should be going in and look. And if they want more information, then they need to go in and look through the system. And again, that means that officers have to make sure that it's up to date all the time, because they never know when a member of the public is going to look at it. And I don't think that's not forcing compliance. I think that's it. Services now recognise, because it's such a joy to use, that actually it's in their interest to keep it as interesting and up to date and current as they possibly can.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. So just to kind of keep us moving along, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the process of actually collecting the right data. It's a bit of a cliche in performance management, but if you don't measure something, you can't manage it. So after you'd kind of set and agreed all of the kind of big headline priorities, how did you actually approach finding the right data to measure these? And did you find it was a particularly resource-intensive process?
I think it probably was, and I mean, this is the first year we've done it this way, and I think we would probably, being entirely honest, we're going to do it differently. We're just starting that cycle again, and we'll do it differently this year. What we did was we set outcomes, and then there was very much a case of there was some that we decided we were going to go with big strategic outcomes, so we knew that they weren't in our gift. So things like, one of the things that we're talking about in terms of our outcomes is growth of jobs in West Sussex. So we measure employment rate. We know that we're not entirely responsible for employment rate, but we chose to measure it anyway. We also measure GVA. But then we went and we talked to services about, right, if growth of jobs is one of our outcomes, in your service plans, what are the sorts of things that you are doing this year that will, and there has been an element on some of our outcomes of shoehorning activity in to fit. And I don't think we'll ever get away from that, but we're moving further and further away from it as we turn that tanker that I talked about. So some of the measures in there I'm not particularly proud of. But what it is highlighting to Cabinet is, you've set these outcomes. Some of them we're going to have to spend some money on being able to measure, because there are some where there isn't a really good measure currently available to us. And actually, if we want to measure it, we're going to have to go out and do bespoke surveys and other such things. So that's been a really interesting exercise. But departments were one of the problems that we've got, and I had a phone call this morning from somebody who is so keen to get there are still people trying to shoehorn their activity into these outcomes to try and demonstrate why they're really important, why what they do is really important. And that's quite, that always makes me sad when I tell them they can't have their measures in the dashboard. But there is a little bit of that still going on. And I think, with the best, a lot of it's coming from the best possible place. But this has allowed us to be far more forensic in our approach to measurement and data. We're not there yet. I don't pretend that we're brilliant at it, but we are getting there, and this has certainly helped.
That's great. Well, it sounds like, and certainly what we see in people who are successful with this is actually taking a pragmatic approach at the start. Working with the data you have, not trying to completely reinvent everything, not burdening people with new data collection regimes, and then iterating on it. So as you say, bringing in new surveys to plug holes where you don't have data. Absolutely the right approach to being successful here. final section from us, and then we'll dive into some of the Q&A. I've had a couple of questions that I can see online. I just wanted to touch on probably the hardest bit of all, the kind of cultural bit about moving an organisation away, particularly as as I mentioned earlier, that's been kind of conditioned to a very top-down approach to performance management. So my question here is with culture being the hardest thing to change, what do you think has actually enabled West Sussex to make, what is actually quite a fundamental change to the way that you do performance management? What are the kind of key ingredients for being successful here?
I think having support from the leadership has made it. We could never have put this system in place in 3 months if we didn't have that. We had loads of barriers. We had an IT barrier. There was loads of different things that made it really difficult. And there was a resource problem. In terms of strategic performance, there's only 2 of us who were implementing this process and doing all of the sort of one-to-ones with the various different data owners to try and that was tough. But I think because we had that mandate from the leadership that they wanted to be open and honest and transparent with our data, that was one of the real key things for us. I mean, we got quite a lot of interest in this from journalists, and we got a big double-page spread in one of our local newspapers, which, I mean, it held us over the coals a little bit because, they basically said, doing really well in the economy, you're not filling your data in for adult services because at that time there was, for our later life dashboard, because at that time there was quite a lot of data that we were still waiting on because it reported in arrears, and they said, and you're failing children. And I think if we hadn't had that mandate from the leader, we could have buckled at that point, but we knew some of this was going to come, and we knew it was going to put a microscope on what we were doing, and she never flinched, and she was very much of the view that, well, they're probably quite right, that's probably where we are, and you know what, that's what the data's telling them, and that's what we've put up there, and that's absolutely right, and we will be better. But what they also did was they applauded us for doing it in that newspaper article, and they asked other counties and councils nearby whether they were going to do the same sort of thing, because and their editorial was very much about being honest and open about where you're doing well and where you're not, and that we owed that to the electorate. And I think that was really important for us. I also think that on reflection, we should have involved in West Sussex, performance doesn't sit in one place. So some bits sit with me in terms of corporate planning and supporting the Cabinet to decide those high-level outcomes, but the operational performance sits somewhere else. And what we've done for this year is link those things, those two pieces far closer together so that you get that golden thread, which I think has probably been missing on some of the outcomes that we've tried to achieve this year. Some of them are spot on, but a couple of them are a little bit broken, and I think we should have done that earlier. And I think being a bit, you have to really believe. I really believed in this from the very beginning, and I came at this from just being more open and transparent to the public. We knew it wasn't going to be perfect first time. We knew that some of the measures that we were putting in there probably weren't as close to the outcomes as we'd like them to be, but they were the best we could do at the time. And I think sometimes you just have, like you said earlier, you just have to be a bit pragmatic, really. But we were just dogmatic. We went for it. We weren't letting anybody stand in our way. There was me and one of the members of my team who did a brilliant job putting this together, and I can see somebody's asked a really technical question and he should be the person answering it. But we were just absolutely determined that this was going to happen, and we went for it. And with the support of the leader, with Louise, that's how we managed to get this in. And I think it's really improved our performance culture for the better, and will continue to do so.
That's great, thank you, Sam. Yeah, and something just kind of jumps to my mind. You were talking there about the role of the leader in West Sussex, and then obviously you also have the different portfolio holders in Cabinet, and then also the kind of local members who are out there talking to their communities. So I just wanted to kind of pull in a question from one of our participants. Someone's just returned from a leading digital transformation thought leadership session with the kind of lead and portfolio members of 12 local authorities up in the northeast of England, and they would like to know, more generally than just the leader, how have your members kind of embraced their leadership role in this project?
Some more than others. Some more than others. We've had some people who got this immediately and absolutely understood the potential of it and understood why we were doing it. And I think there was some really key people who motivated this. So the chair of our Performance and Finance Committee, she was very, very keen on it. The leader, as I said, and across those, we've got 3 dashboards up at the moment. We've got the children's, the economy, and later life. And the 3 cabinet members for those were really keen to be as honest and open as possible. Like I said earlier, some of the children's data in there. I mean, it's about how quickly our social workers see children who are in need of, who have been referred to, or families that have been referred to social work, to our social services. And putting those sorts of numbers out there at the moment when we've got all of the stuff that's going on around children's safeguarding, I think is really brave. And it isn't always green. It isn't always green. That's a threshold measure, and it's not always green at all. And I think that was really brave. And I think we went through this, though, and I think the key to it was we talked members through it every step of the way and explained to them what it would mean. So I went to full council, and before the full council meeting, I demonstrated the dashboard in its earliest possible form. And people were really liked it. And when I said to people, this was the key thing, it was selling the benefits. When I said to people, can you tell me how far into the total performance monitor of the 92 pages you read? Everybody said that they got no further than 5 pages. So there was no real scrutiny of performance, because the first 5 pages were headlines about how much money we'd spent. And it wasn't a hard sell, because it was presenting it to them in a way that they could. It's very visual, it's very easy to understand, and I think that has been key. I think the other thing is that members know that they can come up with ideas for what else they want to see in the dashboard. So we've got some plans to, one of the things that a member said to me at the scrutiny committee the other day is, this doesn't reflect the things that are in my post bag. You know, that I want to know how quickly we're replying to people. I want to know how quickly we're telling people, you know, responding to people's inquiries, how quickly we respond to data and freedom of information requests, whether we are, you know, whether we're filling potholes on time. And so because there isn't a mechanism for feedback, we're getting that now from members. We're getting, I would like you to put this information out there because I think this needs, you know, people need to see it, and this is what my constituents are asking for. And so we're responding to that feedback, and we're going to do, hopefully, in the next sort of month, 2 months, we'll have another dashboard up there which is around customer satisfaction, how quickly we respond to our residents, what they're complaining to us about, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think you've got to take them with you. You've absolutely got to take them with you.
That's great. Thank you very much. So just before we close up, I had a couple of other questions from participants. So as you said, Sam, one of them is of a slightly technical nature. So somebody's asked about, you know, using real-time information. Sounds great, but how do you ensure quality and robustness of data? I'm happy to lend some thoughts in this one, if that's helpful. I don't know if you had any.
I can pick it up. I'll do my best, because I'm more of the, I like all of the blue sky, let's be all beautiful and make ourselves very transparent. And the nitty-gritty of how we report through the system is probably not my forte. But I think one of the main reasons that data owners like it is because they only have to update their data once, because it links, it will pull through from different databases. Once you tell the system where the database is, it will update as and when, and then the narrative does require you to go in and update that. But the data will update as you update it. So if they're collecting it anyway, putting it on the system is no more onerous. Another response to the question around data quality, something we haven't really mentioned, but that is a very powerful kind of aspect of the West Sussex dashboard, is that all of the data that's published is published as open data. And there's nothing quite like you know, shining the light of transparency on data to really help people get their act together with regards to data quality. So knowing it's being published has quite an impact, doesn't it, Sam? Yeah, it does, and that's one of the things that I've been talking to the chief our new Chief Operating Officer about is about we're starting a stream of work on customer service, and we don't think that our customer service is good enough. And one of the things that we are looking at is if we put up our customer, we tell people what our customer service standards are, and then we tell them how we're reporting against them. There will be no better way of making sure that we get better at dealing with our customers first time and right first time and improving our systems to make sure that happens than putting up our data about how well we're doing. And similarly, I think we're all in the business of we're serving customers who don't have a choice about where they go. They should get the best possible service they can, and I think that's very much forefront of our mind and putting it out there. People can get it anywhere, that's the thing. And I think in this day and age now with social media and with freedom of information requests, all of the data that we have, people can get at anywhere. And I'm hopeful that this will, if we can put as much as possible data onto this, I'm hopeful, and it's just finger in the air, but I'm hopeful we can reduce the number of FOI requests we get. Cause if we're just really open and transparent about what we're doing, then people don't need to come to us and ask us, through an FOI request, because we're putting it out there.
Fantastic. And that's just before we wrap up, it kind of leads neatly into one of the final questions. Somebody's actually gone and had a look at performance.westsussex.gov.uk and noticed that the NHS Health Check is actually, that goal is actually now green. And they asked the question about, do you think the public feel more engaged with the council and the services it provides? I know communicating performance information was one of the real kind of outcomes you wanted to achieve by adopting this system. Do you think it's happening? And how are you going to be keeping an eye on that?
Yeah, every single dashboard on our website has a feedback button, and so far, we've had something like, I think we're up to about 140,000 page views now, and we are getting some of that feedback back. Some of it is, some of it's quite cynical. So you do get bits and pieces about, you're only telling us what you think, you're only showing us what you want to show us. And I think we're able to demonstrate, because as many of the measures in that dashboard are red as they are green, that are red or amber, that's not the case. And I think that we've got some people coming back and saying, I'd like to know what your performance is on various things, and we have to look at those and work out how we can best represent that data. But I do think people are engaging with it. There is an awful lot of cynicism out there about what local authorities do, and I think this is one of the ways that we can try and combat some of that. I've seen it as well through, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing this survey about what matters to you is the name of the survey, which will inform some of our outcomes and what we spend our money on next year. And we're getting an awful lot of cynicism back about, you're asking us this, but it won't make any difference. And hopefully, this is just one of the ways that we can demonstrate that we are, listening to what people, the information that people want and putting it out there. It'll take a long time, and there will always be some people who you will never persuade. But I think it is. I think we are getting there slowly but surely, and that's the other part of my job, is finding really interesting ways to communicate some of this data and to show people. So we're increasingly using social media to highlight some of the information that's on the dashboard in the most timely fashion. So when measures are updated, or when some interesting data comes in around employment rate, for example, driving people to the dashboard so they can have a look at it through social media.
Thank you very much, Sam. I think that's a lovely place to wrap things up. We've actually run a little bit over, so thank you to I think all of the attendees who stayed online throughout, even though we've run on a little bit. Thank you very much, Sam, for joining us this morning and talking to us about the work you've been doing in West Sussex. And I know that you're always happy to kind of chat to people about what you're doing and share thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on, Sam.
I'm just going to say, if anybody is interested in how we've pulled the system together, or wants to talk about how it works, or I'm more than happy to take any questions, or just give me a call.
Fantastic. And our contact details are up on the screen there. So of course you can see the dashboard at performance.westsussex.gov.uk, and you can get in touch with us by email and Twitter as well there. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.